Greetings, Earthlings. Today, I'm going to be talking about a very controversial subject. Should seatbelts be put onto school buses? Now, I know what everyone is thinking. School buses haven't had seatbelts before. Why should they be added now? Well, I'll tell you, dear viewer. This is why. Look at all the damage on that bus. To be fair, that was an extremely situational crash with a dump truck. So that is not what every bus crash will look like or does look like. Before we make a decision on whether seatbelts should be added to buses or not, let's look at some pros and cons of seatbelts in general. Pro number one: kids wearing seatbelts are less likely to be ejected from a vehicle during a crash, which is usually a good thing. Pro number two: seatbelts can be a way of educating kids about road safety from an early age. Pro number three: wearing seatbelts can reduce the risk of injury in case of a crash. Con number one: if a fight breaks out on the bus, the students could potentially use the buckles as weapons. Con number two: if a fire, flood, or something else happens on a bus, seatbelts can make it harder for young students to evacuate and get to safety. Con number three: installing seatbelts on every bus in America would be really expensive. Now let's look at some proper statistics. In 2020, 38,824 people died in car crashes compared to 54 people in bus crashes. That's almost 720 times less deaths in buses without seatbelts than in cars with seatbelts. In 2001, 42,000 people were injured in bus crashes compared to a little over 3 million people injured in car crashes. From 2009 to 2018, school buses accounted for only 0.4% of all fatal motor vehicle crashes. 89.8% of children under the age of 12 are reported to be wearing seatbelts. A shockingly low 51% of high school students are reporting always wearing their seatbelts, and 91.9% of adults over the age of 18 report always wearing their seatbelts. Let's shift focus to one of the cons of seatbelts mentioned earlier in the video: the cost. A seatbelt can cost anywhere from $25 to $250, so let's assume the average is somewhere in the middle, $137. A school bus typically fits two students with around 23 to 28 seats, somewhere in the middle, which means that an average school bus would need to install 46 to 56 seatbelts, totaling a cost of $6,302 to $7,672 per bus. At my school, BFHS, it would cost at least 25,208 total to install seatbelts on all of the buses. To understand why seatbelts are important, we need to understand Newton's three laws of motion. First law: an object will remain at rest or continue to move in a straight line at a constant velocity unless acted upon by an external force. When you are at a stoplight in your car and you start moving quickly, you feel pushed back into your chair. The opposite is true if you come to a sudden stop and you keep moving forward. Only your seatbelt is keeping you from going a further. Second law: the acceleration of an object is directly proportional to the net force acting upon it and inversely proportional to its mass. Mathematically, force equals mass times acceleration. The simplest experiment to show Newton's second law are experiments such as a pendulum, a mass on a spring, or the collision balls on a pool table, and assuming there is little friction. If you change the masses or forces, velocities and accelerations will change. Third law: for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. This means that whenever one object exerts a force on a second object, the second object exerts an equal force in the opposite direction on the first object. A rocket works by propelling mass out the back end at a high velocity. The action of the burning fuel accelerating out the back end applies an opposite reaction force to the rocket, moving it forward. The rocket is not simply pushing against the ground. This works even in the vacuum of space. Newton's first law of motion states that an object at rest will stay at rest, and an object in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. In car accidents, a seatbelt will act as the outside force on you. Now that we know the proper physics, let's discuss what happens to people in a car crash depending on their seatbelt. Those who survive a serious crash while not wearing a seatbelt tend to suffer much more severe injuries. People who fail to wear any sort of safety restraint can be thrown throughout the vehicle and, in some cases, be thrown out of the vehicle entirely. While wearing only a lap belt, you are less likely to be ejected from the car. However, you still could suffer severe injuries such as broken ribs or intestine damage. Wearing a seatbelt reduces the chance of death by about 45% 25% and reduces the chance of injury by 50. However, just because you wear a seatbelt doesn't mean you won't get injured at all. In fact, seatbelts can cause injuries such as skin abrasion and bruising, bowel injuries, lower back fractures, and liver and spleen lacerations. Even though seatbelts are starting to look like quite a bad idea, they are able to slow people down and prevent them from continuing to move within the car and getting injured even worse. One of the main reasons seatbelts are not already required on school buses is because school buses are designed to not need seatbelts. As for my personal opinion, I do not believe that seatbelts are needed. School buses are already safer without them, and adding seatbelts is personally not worth the trouble. Of course, this is my opinion, and you are welcome to disagree. What you are seeing on screen right now is all of the sources and websites that I used to make this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope everyone here has a great day.